Dr. Monica Barreto is a clinical child psychologist in practice with Orlando Health Arnold Palmer Hospital for Children. Dr. Barreto is experienced in providing clinical interventions to address the complex needs of children and families exposed to a variety of medical and behavioral conditions. Venus Beulah is a registered mental health counselor at the Counseling and Wellness Center at Beacon College in Leesburg, Florida, and an alumna of the college. Our first question goes to Venus. Venus, in general, how is self-esteem impacted by those who struggle with learning disabilities?
It's affected in many ways, especially with their core belief about themselves can change over time, which will affect different aspects within their life. If a person believes they're not good enough, their self-esteem will mirror their belief. Self-worth plays a big part in it as well. How they view themselves can deflate their overall self-esteem / self-confidence. If you have low self-worth, your self-esteem will take a hit. Ruminating on what others tell them can become their inner voice, which can perpetuate their beliefs about themselves as well, decreasing their self-esteem and how they see themselves overall. If there isn't a strong foundation, it will constantly be questioned within themselves, which will also decrease their overall self-esteem, self-worth, and self-confidence.
Thank you, Venus. Monica, children with learning disabilities often develop a negative self-perception about themselves, unlike their neurotypical peers. But does this happen in a vacuum?
So what tends to happen when we're thinking of children with learning disabilities, over time they'll start to realize they're having more struggles in responding to things or reading out loud in class. They may start having pull in or pull out services. So they start noticing they're different from their peers. Sometimes we can see some bullying or teasing because of that. So what we can start to see is avoidance of academics, and it starts to just grow and grow and grow. Avoidance, we may have some behavioral issues that they may then lead to home, some anxiety, some depression. So we kind of see it as a little bit kind of a snowball effect, where it starts little by little, noticing they're different, then either getting the help can sometimes help, getting them those tools. But a lot of kids can go very long without realizing or being taught or learn that they have a learning disability. So we sometimes even doing psychological testing or educational testing. I've gotten some kids that they're 15, 14, and now we're letting them know that they're having this difficulty. So they've been struggling for many, many years. So I definitely have seen it as a big snowball effect. The sooner we catch it, the sooner we can intervene psychologically and educationally. We do see big positive impacts in their self-esteem as well as their overall functioning.
Thank you, Monica. Venus, do individuals with learning disabilities experience social, emotional, and motivational hardships more severely than their peers who don't have learning differences?
So that's a very interesting, great question. I think overall it's something that they perpetuate within themselves, but also when it goes to like the academic part, they are constantly questioning, can I do this? Am I good enough? And that goes back to the first question in regards to self-esteem. So when it comes to things in the classroom, that can definitely have a trickle down effect when it becomes like within their peer environment, but also in the home front. So in a way, yes, but at the same time, it can also perpetuate as that student gets older who is struggling with a learning disability compared to their counterparts.
Thank you, Venus. Monica, in what ways does it manifest when a child lapses into negativity, when they start feeling ashamed of their learning differences? How does that play out often?
It depends. That's a great question. It does depend on the individual's personality. I've seen it primarily in two ways. Either a child may begin to isolate, kind of take that stressor and kind of just keep it inside. We can see some withdrawal in schools, withdrawal with peers, maybe some difficulties withdrawing from family, kind of leading more towards that anxiety or depression, becoming very tearful or overwhelmed during homework time. Really that kind of shutting down is a big word that parents often use. Sometimes we also see them the opposite, where the behavioral outbursts, whether in class, a lot of children may become overwhelmed. Let's say their learning disability is in math. math comes along, we start to see behavioral outbursts, trouble in the classroom, the student then gets removed from the classroom. We've now removed their struggle, or they kind of then withdraw and don't want to engage. So we can either see it kind of develop more anxiety and depression, some behavioral difficulties where they're feeling so overwhelmed that anger kind of is what we see first. So we can see in many of those different ways, either withdrawn or kind of that behavioral outburst, really having difficulty with those emotions that come with that learning disability or that specific subject that may be a lot harder for them.
Monica, children with learning disabilities typically have average to above average intelligence. So why are they so easily stigmatized?
That's a good question. And when we think about, there shouldn't be too many differences. But when we do test academic testing or even an individual's IQ to get that level of intelligence, everybody kind of tends to vary. That is an average of several things like their working memory, their processing speed, how quickly are they getting information, how quickly can they respond to those things. Some of those I've worked with many kids where their strengths are verbal versus others that they can think and respond quickly. So it depends on where their strengths and weaknesses are. When a lot of kids that I've done some testing with learning disabilities, they tend to struggle with that working memory or sometimes that processing speed. So let's imagine we're in the middle of class in English. The teacher calls on a student who has a learning disability in reading, although they may have an average intelligence. They're processing, maybe they ask a question, the student's still trying to understand the question to be able to respond. That lag time can lead to teasing or kind of hurry up, let's go of what other students are trying to get. So although they have an average intelligence or above average intelligence, parts of how they take in information and learn information can be different than those around them and can lead to kind of putting them on a spotlight. So what I often work with teachers is letting them know, ask the student the question, give them some time to process it, go to another student, and then come back to them, or let them know what passage they're going to be reading, just so that student has some time to prepare. So that's some of the things of why we may see some teasing or some difficulty or stigmatized from other students. Just some minor changes or difficulties that a student may have compared to another student.
Thank you, Monica. Venus, this question goes to you. How important and how critical is the parent and family support system to helping a child who has a learning difference be able to feel good about themselves? And if it is critical, what does a healthy family and parent support system look like?
That's a really good question. When it comes to family support, it is very important because the family is the first home front that starts to advocate for that child in the school system. So it's very important. And what that can typically look like is kind of establishing a strong foundation for a growth mindset instead of a fixed mindset. When we start to instill in that child that they are capable of anything, that they don't necessarily have to listen to the negativity that others perpetuate for them, but they have a voice and that they can build onto that voice and to start advocating for themselves. So that growth mindset versus fixed mindset kind of stance in regards to the family unit, but also just the family, like giving them that reflective listening style to also help to formulate and build that foundation up stronger. So when they are in that school environment or hanging out with peers, that they perpetuate that positivity within themselves so it kind of reflects outwardly.
Thank you, Venus. And our final question today is to both of you, and I'll start with Monica. What ways can parents and family members too actively teach their kids with learning disabilities to, number one, embrace their learning disabilities, to number two, be able to ward off all the negativity around them, and just number three, to be able to not see having a learning difference as a scarlet letter?
Yes, and I think there's many aspects to it, but one is to normalize that everybody has their strengths and their weaknesses. I always use the example of glasses. Like, I can't see very well, but the moment you give me glasses, that gives me the tools to be able to see and engage like everyone else. And the supports in school, whether that be in pull-out or insert in tutoring sessions, helping kids learn that it's okay to have tools. There's certain things that I'm going to be really good at and certain things that I may need some help in. And we can do that by modeling and also educating kids. There's some, great online videos to help kids understand what is a learning disability, what does this mean. So the more they know what's happening with them, they can either explain that to friends if they want to, or just better get to know themselves. And also talking about it and getting them in activities that they are good at and that they enjoy to kind of balance those out, because there are things in school that may be difficult for them. So making sure there are some things that they're also enjoying after, to balance out those stressors with those things that they enjoy.
Thank you, Monica. Your thoughts, Venus?
Yes, I absolutely agree. It starts with creating that foundation to which they learn and recognize their strengths, and to normalize that their learning disability is not a crutch. It's just another way of processing the information or learning differently, and identifying their internal skills. So that way they're able to maximize those skills and not necessarily look at just what they think that they're lacking, because in reality, they're not lacking anything. They just learn differently. And establishing a growth mindset versus fixed mindset, like I stated earlier, because by doing this, it will help them believe in themselves and not rely so much on the negative influences that are around them when it comes to their learning disability. And it will also help to cultivate a more positive way of thinking. A lot of times we have that inner voice, and sometimes it's more negative than positive. So cultivating a more positive inner voice will also help to cultivate a new mindset overall. Also focusing on not specifically on grades. A lot of times in our society, we are always focused on grades or comparing them to others, but also it's important to maximize their strengths and not compare them to others, because we all learn differently. And that's the beautiful thing about being an individual, unique person. Just because we have a learning disability, I say we because I do have learning disability. So that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just being able to learn your disability and to master different skill sets in order to be successful overall.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Venus. And Dr. Monica Barreto, Venus Beulah, thanks for the knowledge.